all these things that are going on right now are so intense. They're just so intense. And you feel guilty escaping into books sometimes too. Like it's like they're so intense that you feel the need to be in them,
Mhm.
thinking about them, doing something about them all the time, that reading and relaxing feels like betrayal. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Into the Fold, a Book and Lit Fest podcast with JL and Lynn. My name is JL Richardson. I'm your host, and I'm also the founder and executive director of the Festival of Literary Diversity, or FOLD.
I am your other host. I'm Hudson Lynn. I'm the program coordinator at The Fold. Welcome to season 2, episode 4 of Into the Fold.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about marketing in the early stages, and we're never really done with marketing, but
Nope.
we are taking a little bit of a sidestep to talk about reading and specifically mood reading. And I think when we talk about reading, we're always going to be thinking about it not just as readers, but also from a writer's perspective.
Yes. So reading, when we talk about mood reading, it's not just adding books to your to be read list, which is, I'm sure, already very, very long. But we're going to talk about how you can use reading to make your writing better. So let's get into it.
Okay, so I think it's always great. We don't have a guest today. It's just the two of us. And what I love about the episodes where it's just the two of us is I think it's really fun to share a little bit more about each other, about ourselves, and you can get to know us a little bit better. And so I wanted to start maybe, Lynn, you want to kick off with talking about the role that reading has played in your life, or how you came into reading and how that led to writing.
Yeah, I think that I don't know any author who didn't first start out as a reader. Um, and so that is certainly certainly the case for me. I read a lot when I was a kid, and it was like my escapism because I was bullied a lot. My childhood wasn't fun, but the happy place to go was into books, right? Because that would give me that really. It's a different world to immerse yourself in. I identify with the protagonist. I read a lot of mystery when I was a kid, so I would be the detective, like figuring out the, who done it. And I think that is what is so powerful about reading, and why readers like to read, and why writers like to read and then also write, is to be able to create these worlds where you are able to evoke emotions from yourself as you're writing, but also from the reader. And depending on, as a reader, depending on what I want to feel, that's going to dictate what I want to read at a particular time, which for me is what I consider mood reading to be. Is like, what do I want to feel right now? Do I want to escape reality? Then I'm going to go find a book that's going to help me escape reality. Or do I really want to dive deep into a particular topic? Then I'm going to go find books that will help me do that.
Yeah,
How
and
about you?
I think for me, I don't remember a time where I wasn't a reader. I think what's interesting to me is I have this like complex relationship with reading because I read so much as a kid. My family was all into sports. I also played sports, but I was the artsy one. And so reading was my way of accessing art initially. That was like my first entryway into art and imagination and that kind of space. Um, I'm also from a Christian home and a Christian family. And so we were reading a lot in church, like you're reading the Bible a lot. And as a result, what happened in my early years was I was actually reading really like problematic books, honestly, in some cases. Some were really great. They were really great, like kid lit, like, eating spaghetti and like you have problems with your family, whatever, not a big deal. But I started to read Christian romance novels, and they were
Oh my
like,
God.
not just Christian romance novels, Lynn. They were Christian novels set in the Civil War. Like,
Oh,
so, like, bells and like the girls with the poofy dresses marrying the soldier who came home from war. And I was so young when
oh my God.
I was so young when I was reading them that I didn't even understand like the racial context. And one of the things, one time we'll talk about faith and community and the bads and the goods. But one of the bad things is with the Christian community, there's a couple, is that there's this really there's a tendency to ignore race and to really
Mm-hmm.
prop up like white supremacy,
Mm-hmm.
literally in this case. And so I was reading these things and really internalizing some problematic views about myself, about the world, about what it meant to be Black. And it wasn't until, because in high school I was reading all white authors as well, it wasn't until I went to university and I started reading Black authors and I started to see these issues that I was facing in my own mind, my own self, um, addressed in books for the first time, where I wasn't like a back character or I wasn't like the character you're not meant to see. It was these, Lawrence Hill, Janet Sears. I'm reading their work and seeing the things I'm struggling with on the page being conveyed. I could quote back to you lines from Blackberry Sweet Juice, from the play Harlem Duet, that I read that literally transformed my view of myself in the world. And understanding what it means to be Black, why I'm proud to be Black, why I feel complex ways about it because of what I was reading early on and watching on TV even. And so reading became for me a really powerful tool for forming identity and transforming identity. And if you've read any of my work, you'll see like those influences in my books. Like I'm not talking about light stuff. I don't. I talk about hard stuff all the time, even when I'm writing children's literature, because it was such I was formed so much in negative ways and then reformed in positive ways through books that I really see books as a tool for unpacking, discussing, identifying, understanding those things.
Mm-hmm. I find that really interesting how the things that you read influence what you now write. Because I mentioned that when I was a kid, I read a lot of mystery. And then in sort of like middle school, I guess, I transitioned from mystery to romance. And then I've just been a hardcore romance reader since then. But I wasn't reading Christian romance. I was reading distinctly not Christian romance.
But you were growing up in a Christian home as well, were you
I
not?
was.
So that exactly. You were doing the naughty stuff and I was
doing
obeying the
naughty
rules
stuff.
and it was bad for me.
And okay, so I'm not going to name names, but one of like the older like sisters in my church, who is like the older sister of of someone who is the same age as me, who also in the church, she had a lot of romance novels in these big bins in her basement that she would give to me. So it was like, well, she's also a member of the church and she's reading it and she's giving me this stuff. So it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Yes. Anyway.
But I love it that those are the things that they shape you so significantly though. I think that's what's so lovely about books. I
Mhm.
will say this. I will say this on the marketing, to just plug marketing for a second. I've said I think reading needs a PR campaign to talk about why we should be reading. I mean, I think we talk about the obvious ones, but the ways in which it helps us understand ourselves and others in a slow, individual way just cannot be compared to any other form of art. It is deliberate, it's careful, it's not particularly quick. It's on your own. You can share it with others afterwards. You can read it collectively as a book club, but like you're going to wrestle with your own self real hard in these books, or you're going to just start taking in really bad or good stuff on your own and have it shape the way you talk to others and shape the way you engage. And so when reading is working really well, it is extremely powerful as a tool to learn, but also as like just fun too. It doesn't always have to be serious. Mine tends to be serious because I'm an intense person, but like it can be really like the place you go to get away too.
Yeah, for sure. And it's this idea that like when you sit down with a book, so like the difference between reading, I guess, with your eyes versus like just watching a TV show or watching a movie is that you can just sit on the couch and then this story is being broadcast at you and it's more of a passive activity. Whereas
Yeah.
with reading, if you're going to actually like open a paperback or if you're going to have your like e-reader with you, you have to choose to sit there and put your eyes on the page and read the book, right? It's an active thing that you're doing and you have to sit there and spend the time and then you get immersed in that world. And I think that's the powerful thing is that as authors, we are creating these other worlds. And sometimes this make believe world is very similar to the real world, and sometimes it's completely different. But we are creating worlds and saying something about the world in these books, which I always thought is just like, it's kind of like a wild thing when you think about it. It's like, that's wild. Just
Pretty
blows my
crazy.
mind. Yeah.
But I think when we talk about mood reading, I think this is also a really interesting thing because you talk about the focus it takes and the intentionality behind
Hmm.
reading. That's different from like I listened to a song and I might not have heard the words. Like you can't not really hear the words of a book and keep going.
Hmm.
And so there's this a particular kind of intention. And so when we talk about mood reading, what does that actually mean to you?
Okay. So it took me a long time to figure out what mood reading meant. And I used to be one of those people where if I picked up a book, I had to finish it. I wouldn't let myself put it down. Um, but as I read more and more, and I guess as I got older, I realized that like life is too short to make yourself read something you don't want to read. So if I'm not
Yes.
feeling it for whatever reason, then I put it down. And sometimes it's not because it's a bad book. Sometimes it's just I'm not in the mood for that, right? Like I'm not in the mood for a dark, heavy book. I'm in the mood for something lighter and fluffy and fun. Or I'm in the mood to like really dive into this particular topic. So I want like a nonfiction book by some expert who's going to just break down this subject for me. And that's what I feel like reading. So it's very much like in touch with my emotions. What is like resonating with me right now? And if it is, great. And if it's not, again, doesn't mean it's a bad book. It might just be not the right time for it. What?
Yeah, I think for me, there were 2 times when I understood mood reading in a particular way. The first time happened when I was in university, right after university. I studied English, at the University of Guelph, and so for 4 years, I always had an English class in my lineup, in my semesters. I often had history, theater, and in all of those classes, there was a significant amount of reading, and not just reading textbooks. In a lot of those classes, I was reading plays, I was reading novels, I was reading memoirs, and so I remember finishing university and being like, I don't want to read a book right now. Like just
Mhm.
not and not understanding why, but it's because I had read for requirement so excessively and so continuously that I honestly didn't know how to figure out what I liked reading because I just did not want to read.
Mhm.
And it took like finding ways into really cool and fun books to get me back into the rhythm. And the other time that that happened was during the like uh, after the pandemic, like recently, I had another slump, and I think it might have happened. I used to do book reviews for CBC, and I would do like every 2 weeks, I would review a book. And it was the same kind of thing as university. I was required to find books. There were certain parameters around it. I found some that I just enjoyed and read for fun, but there was also these ones that it was like, can you do a beach read? Can you do, something about sports because we're talking about the Olympics? And there was this like pressure and speed to reading that I was like, I think I just reeled back after it for a bit and was like, uh, I don't want to feel any pressure of any kind to read
Mhm.
anything. And so those were the 2 moments where I realized mood reading. Sometimes you go through these slumps where you might not finish things, and you just like got to give yourself permission to find your way back in.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. I went through that recently where I just didn't want to read anything. And I don't know if there was any particular trigger. I think it was just like, there's a lot going on in my life right now, and I don't have the brain space to read. I'm just going to doom scroll social media instead because that's so much healthier. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
I know. I think the doom scrolling makes it worse, honestly. But I do think like one of the things that happens right now, pandemic, Black Lives Matter,
Mhm.
uh, global conflicts, Gaza, like all these things that are going on right now are so intense. They're just so intense. And you feel guilty escaping into books sometimes too. Like it's like they're so intense that you feel the need to be in them,
Mhm.
thinking about them, doing something about them all the time, that reading and relaxing feels like betrayal.
Mhm.
And I think that that's also understanding that books are like movies, they're like music, like we're allowed to find joy. We're allowed to experience entertainment, and that books don't have to be these like learning tools, bang, bang, bang on your head, you know?
Mhm.
I think that understanding the escapism element of literature is really important when your mood reading is like finding is hitting a block.
Mhm.
um yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like I'm in the romance world, and um romance is this, it's sometimes it's considered a very frivolous genre. And I mean, it can be very frivolous. It can also be very serious if you're in a particular area of the genre. But this idea that we are, um, I'm reading about people falling in love, and like sometimes it feels like, what right do I have to be reading and writing about people falling in love when there are people who are dying, on the other side of the world? But I think there's also something powerful about that, right? Particularly with romance, but also with other genres, is that like the world is a dark place, but I want to write something that brings light into it. And I want to read something that brings light into it, to say that like, yes, there is a lot of suffering in the world right now, but it doesn't have to all be suffering. Like we can imagine a world that is better. We can imagine a world where we can all find a place to belong, and we can all find someone who loves us. And I think I truly believe that writing that kind of story is making the world a better place. And then reading that kind of story is helping my brain like reset. And so it's not all like the world's a horrible place, but like reminding myself that the world can be horrible, but can also be really good. And that is what we are trying to do. We're trying to bring the world back to a better place.
Like your books say the world's a bad place, but you can have sexy time. And my books say the world is a bad place. The world is a bad place. you know?
But
Like,
no, but
and
you're like,
that's
the world's a bad place in slightly different ways. So maybe we should try avoid going there.
yes. But also, I set mine in imagined places. So it's really the world is a bad place everywhere, is what most of like, is what my gutter child really says. But it's interesting because so when I read books, especially I would say the last 5 to 10 years have been different, but prior to that, I really enjoyed sad, dark books. Like
Mhm.
you could murder the whole line of characters, and I was like, that book was amazing. You could have like world conflict, and I was like, it was so deep. I loved it. Like there was, I would tell the plot of some of my favorite books, and people would be like, ooh, that sounds really depressing. I was like, oh, I don't know. That sounds completely normal to me. And so when I wrote Gutter Child, I wrote a book that I would love. And
Mhm.
so there are some tricky things that happen in the book. It's a dystopia about systemic racism. So, it's not light. And when I finished it in May of 2020. And May of 2020, we were in the midst of the pandemic, or the very beginning stages of the pandemic. And Black Lives Matter hit this like very loud peak. And I felt there was all sorts of things I was going through in writing the book. But what was terrible is that as the book was going to come out that January, I was like, I should be giving the world something nice, like sexy time. I should be giving them something, romantic or fun or light. And I was giving them like a mirror of the world we were in. And yes, there are some people who like that. And there are other people for whom that was too much for that time. And so I actually put a note at the front of the book that says, like, this book reflects a world like we're in, where there's hard times. Read it at the pace you require, put it down if you need to. And I remember a woman writing, someone had posted a picture of Gutter Child on Instagram, and she wrote and said, not to me, she just wrote to the person who posted it, hey, I'm going through a really tough time. My mom is in the hospital. I don't know how it's going to go. Is this a book I should read? And I responded directly to her, no. 10 out of 10 would not recommend for that situation. I said, maybe you'll come back to it at a different time. And I think that's part of mood reading too. And it's part of, for me, being a responsible writer. I
Mm.
don't like to deceive people about what my books are about or
Mhm.
about how they handle them. People die in my books. Like that's a fact. Unless it's my children's work, somebody is dying and some sad things are happening because that's how I that's just how I've always kind of approached the world, is like tackling what's real, sometimes
Mhm.
being creative about it and using dystopia, but I'm very interested in like the contemporary issues. I'm finding ways in newer writing to do that in different ways, not always like go deep into the pit. But I think I'm very comfortable in the pit. And I remember, I talked to people like Omar Al-Akkad, Katarina Vermette. These are writers that consistently put out books that are similar. Like they deal with hard stuff and hard times. And I remember just saying, like, how do you guys deal with that? Do you feel bad? And they're like, it's what comes to me. It's what I got. It's what I give. And I think that I'm learning to accept that that's just the brand I'm in.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's actually in the past few years, I guess like right when the pandemic started, like in the depths of the pandemic,
Mhm.
um, dark romance started getting really, really popular. And I was like, why is this? Because some of the stuff was really, really dark. Like some of the storylines were like horrific. And what some readers said was that uh, reading dark romance helped them through the dark times in their lives or through the pandemic because they're like, I'm not the only one going through something hard. Here's a character who's going through something hard also, or something even harder than what I've gone through. And that was cathartic in a way. So there's definitely a place for the dark and the heavy stories, even when the world is dark and heavy itself.
I think that the one thing I'll say to anybody listening who does reviews, one of my most irritating reviews though is like, this book is too dark, or this book is too heavy, or this book is too sad. I think that it's okay for you if that's how but it's not really a metric for whether a book is good or not. And I think it's a bias I don't recommend putting into a review of a book, because it can do with like where you're at in your life and what's happening. So I know some people that will tell me like, I loved your book. I couldn't stop reading it, whatever. And then there's other people who were like, I found it really hard to read. Those are two completely acceptable pieces of feedback, because they have to do with like people's specific experiences of them, but they're not really criticisms or indications of the success of the book. And so I think understanding how your own mood affects what you're reading and vice versa is really important. I know I get this a lot, and so I wanted to ask you, Lynn, how do you get through a reading slump? Um, we often talk about writers about getting through writing slump, but how do you get through a reading slump?
Yeah, that's
Are you in
hard.
one right now? It's what
Not, I mean, yes and no. I'm starting to come out of it. And
Mhm.
sometimes I have to, okay, so a couple of things. So sometimes I have to switch up the way that I read, or not even just read, but like consume stories. Cause even though like watching TV and watching movies is not the same thing as reading, but sometimes it can do something similar in terms of
Mhm.
like bringing you into a different world. So sometimes I just need to switch up the format. So maybe I'm not reading a paperback or on my phone, but I'm listening to an audiobook, and I find that a lot easier when a book is difficult for me to get through and I can switch to an audiobook. It's so much better because it's less work for me and I can still like take in what I need to take in. And so I love audiobooks for that reason, just to like I can just put it on when I'm, driving or I'm cooking, and it's it's there in the background, and it helps me get through when it's difficult. Or I like watch some TV, watch some movies. It's still that storytelling element gets me back into that kind of mindset. And then sometimes it's literally just pick a random book and open it up and start reading, not with the expectation that I'm going to finish this thing, but like, hey, I got half an hour. I'm going to just read whatever is on this page, and then maybe it'll hook me and I want to keep reading. Or maybe I'm like, no, and I can put it down. But just saying, like, I want to read, like, reading is a good thing. And um, maybe I don't know why I can't find something to read. So I'm just going to pick up any random book that I can find and just give it a try.
Yeah, I think that I am like a rebellious person. So one of the things that really gets in my way of reading is being told to read something.
Yeah, that
I am
tracks.
like inherently like, nah, don't want to do it. So part of like in our job, obviously people will ask me to moderate, people will ask me to give blurbs, and I really, really try and resist required readings as much as possible because it ruins my overall experience with reading, if I'm being honest.
Mhm.
Um, so blurbs, for example, I never feel comfortable giving a blurb unless I've read a book cover to cover. And
Mhm.
I typically can't do that in the pace. And blurbs are like when they ask an author to like say, Hudson Lynn's book is the greatest discovery since known to mankind. You know, like you've read it, and so I struggle. I try. I actually, if I'm being honest, say no to blurbs. I would say 99.9% of the time, for pace reasons, for my own reading like habits. It affects my mood towards reading if I feel like I have to read it, and so I don't like to put that on myself. So that's one way I try and avoid getting into a reading slump, is
Mhm.
I try to avoid as many required readings as possible. And then I also just really lean into enjoyment. If I'm reading for enjoyment, I will read a book until I stop enjoying it. If it's sometimes if I get far enough, I'll just like, I'm gonna read it just to finish it to check if it's off my list, but I'll complain about it the whole time. And I really try to read for personal enjoyment. If
Mhm.
I don't like the book, I'm not going to finish it. If it takes me a year to read the book because I like it and I'm just like only reading 2 pages at a time for whatever reason, I have one that's on my phone that I've been reading for over a year and I have no problems with the book. I just don't get to it as often as I would like. And I'm not giving up on it because I like it. And I'm not putting shame on myself because it's taking me so long. So
Mhm.
I think it's like really understanding where the pressures are coming from and trying to alleviate those pressures. I think a lot of times, like your book club is telling you you have to have it read by a certain date. Or, some prize is coming out and you're trying to read it ahead of time. If that works for you, great. But those kinds of pressures do not bode well for me.
I was
If
actually gonna ask if you've done, like, book clubs or buddy reads before and how does those
I'm
don't work
not
for
good at
you?
book clubs. I'm not good at book clubs. What I would like for a book club, here's what I want for a book club. I
Mhm.
would like for book clubs that sort of like reveal their book club list like ahead of time. Like maybe like, okay, next year we're going to read these 12 books
Mhm.
and I will read whichever ones I like and dip into whatever book club that I've finished the book that I want to join in on.
Mhm.
So I am not good if it's like, okay, we read this book. Now by next month, read this book. No, I'm going to rebel against that book club every time. That's why
Mhm.
I'm just not good at book clubs for that reason. Um, the
So
other thing I
I
was,
had someone, there was a reader I met at some event, I don't remember, but they were saying how their book club doesn't pick any specific book to read, but they'll say, like, this month we're going to read this genre of book. And then
like it.
they can like pick whichever book that they want within this genre or within some sort of criteria that they've set. And when they meet together, then they can talk about, like, oh, my book was about this, and my book said this, and then they can give recommendations, which I'll just plug is very similar to our Fold Reading Challenge, where
I
every
was
month
just
we
going to
have a
say,
theme and we recommend 4 books that fit into that theme, but you don't have to read any of those four. You can read whichever you want,
yeah.
whichever book you want that fits into that theme. So check out our
I
reading
love and
challenge.
and the reading challenge at Fold is exactly the kind of thing I like because I like to be able to say, look, if I'm going to read 12 books a year, it might not fit into every challenge, but there's going to be at least one or two that I'm like definitely locked in for, and I have a passionate pick that I've read. And so I like that we lay out those challenges. I have to figure out a way where we can have that conversation about the topic and the theme rather than like this particular book because I think that's what a lot of people want. I always say like when there's a conflict going on in the world, I do really like to buy a book by an author who is like the marginalized community within that conflict and pick any genre. Like you don't have to read if it's a war. I remember when the war in Ukraine started, I bought a bunch of books by Ukrainian authors. Some were like about the conflict and about the relationship with Russia, and others were like romance novels and things like that. That's kind of like an enjoyment I like. I like to dip into these kinds of conflicts from the perspective of writers, and I like to approach it whether it's like directly about the conflict or a romance or a mystery that just happens to be set in a country that has conflict going on, which is most countries in the world. And so that's another fun thing I like to do when I'm feeling maybe a little bit helpless in times of conflict. because for me, it's supporting the authors. It's also expanding my understanding of an issue that I probably don't know enough about.
Yeah. So let's talk about how we should read as writers. So, we've talked about how reading has influenced our own writing careers, but why why do you think it's so important for authors to also be strong readers?
So I am like, I've said this before, I'll say it again. I'm very intense personality. I am ambitious. I am unapologetic about both those things. And so when I read, sometimes I'm just enjoying it. But oftentimes there's some level of like critique or criticism going on in my head that's saying, like, what, even on a positive, what do I like about this? Why am I so drawn? What are they doing with words that are making me so excited? Or what are they doing with words that are frustrating me? Or why am I like angry? And so when I read, I actually have a very difficult time reading as a reader, like reading for true relaxation and enjoyment. Even when I'm trying, I'm often like making notes on the side. So I think it's so important because it's how we become better writers. It's how we understand how stories are told, how good stories are told, what makes a good story, what makes a not so good story. And so it's part of the reason why I can't ever let my mood around reading keep me from reading that long. I will say, just as a side note, one of the things that makes it hard to read sometimes is if I'm deep in an editing process.
Mhm.
And it's because I'm reading my own writing so intensely that reading someone else's words feel like a distraction. They feel like I am in a phone conversation with my own book and I'm picking up another phone conversation and I'm trying to listen to both calls at the same time and it's impossible. So sometimes I have to like measure that. But I think that all in all, it's really important. Actually, in the last episode, Cece, who was our guest, finished off talking about reader or writers should have highlighters and pens next to the books they're reading because you should be like marking beats and figuring out how stories are told. And that's, I think, for me, how I see reading as a writer. And 9 times out of 10, especially if it's a paper read, I am analyzing it from a
Mhm.
critical writer's perspective. And maybe that's why I like audiobooks so much, because it does allow me a little bit of space. But
Yeah, I think what you were saying about how when you're in the editing process, it's hard to read because it like interferes. And I certainly find that depending on the genre.
yeah,
So if I'm reading a genre that is too close to what I'm writing, it can interfere with my writing. I'll find that like my voice starts drifting toward what I'm reading. Um, and so like we don't want that. So I have to like read
yeah,
something that's completely different from what I happen to be writing. On the flip side though, sometimes if I'm writing in a genre that maybe I'm not as familiar with and I'm trying to like get into that mindset, that mode of like understanding how does this genre work? Like what is the feeling of this genre as I'm putting words down on the page? Then when that's the case, I feel like I do have to read in the genre a lot to understand like what not what's the pacing like, what type of words do they use, what is like the feel and the texture of the writing in this genre to make sure that I'm matching the genre conventions of that. And sometimes I don't just read to try to get myself into that mindset. I will like watch movies and watch TV shows because it's usually faster. So I was trying to write this romantic suspense a little while ago and I didn't really have experience with romantic suspense and I was like I don't know how to write this. I don't know like what am I doing? So then I watched so many police procedural TV shows, just like every single police procedural TV show I could find.
it's my favorite genre of TV.
I just binge watched all of it. And when the book finally came out, I had so many reviewers saying, like, oh, this reads like a police procedural. And I was like, well, that's what it is.
Yeah, I love that. The thing for me that I've found lately is like if I find, I don't know if it's because I have a teenager or because I have to travel a lot or whatever, but I find my mind is just constantly like, woo, 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 woo.
Mhm.
It could be like perimenopause, menopause. I don't know which one I'm in. One of them is happening. My body is doing things. I think sometimes it's hard for me to settle in. And one of the most effective strategies for me when I need to write has been listening to like 5 to 10, maybe usually 5 to 10 minutes is enough of an audiobook, can be within the genre or without of the genre. But something about listening to a good audiobook, I was listening to a few audiobooks, one was not good. It wasn't particularly helpful. I shouldn't say that. It actually helped me avoid some things. So I shouldn't knock it that way. But listening to a really good audiobook, a well-written audiobook, helped me like I don't know, hear what good writing sounds like
Mm,
and feel motivated to go to my own writing and really like, does my writing sound as good as that writing?
mhm,
And that's been a really, we talked about what you do when you're in a reading slump, but I think when you're in a writing slump, listening to other books can be really helpful. I also have a little strategy called a buddy book. So
mm,
for every book that I've written, have a buddy book. And it's a book that's the similar genre, usually did quite well, like commercially successful on some level. And it's the same space I'm kind of occupying. And I will use those books to help me solve major problems. So I used the example in the last episode about Hunger Games with Gutter Child, but in the new book, the sequel to Gutter Child, um, uh, there's like a scene of conflict where a lot is happening, and I'm like, what order do you tell? Like you've arrived on the scene of like a disaster. What order do you tell the events? Do you describe the scene? Do you like, describe the time of day? Do you get into the characters? Is there dialogue? What comes first? And how do you tell it in a cohesive way when there's lots to take
mhm.
in a given moment in a book? And so I'll open the buddy book up to a scene that's similar or has a lot going on in a similar way. And I'll literally look at, how do they open the chapter? What's the first thing they talk about? Is it setting? Is it time? Is it character? How do they like, and I'll sort of mark out the things that happen. I also do this if I just don't know how to start a chapter or end a chapter. I'll look at the examples they give. How do they open these chapters? How do they close these chapters? Is it a cliffhanger? Is it a quote? Is it always a statement? Is it just like the end of the action? And I'll use the buddy book as a way of identifying what's going well and what's not. And that's has been a really helpful tool for me as well.
It's so interesting how you are like taking the book apart or like taking a scene apart and analyzing it that way. And that's what Cece said also, right? Like in the last episode where she's saying that you should read a book multiple times. And the first time it might just be understanding how you are reacting emotionally to it. But then after that, you need to figure out, okay, like where is the inciting incident? How long does it take to resolve, this thing or that thing? And just really like taking it apart and understanding the mechanics of a good book. I can't do that. I cannot,
Mm.
I can't do that.
You who analyze Amazon statistics on spreadsheets cannot analyze a book that way?
No, no, I don't know why. I can't do that. I still read for like enjoyment, and when I read for enjoyment, I don't analyze it at all. I'm really just like here for the story. I don't read as a writer. And also, I when I go to writing workshops, um and the presenter is saying like, "Oh, I do this to like this is how I plot out a book." And I'm like, "Oh, that's so interesting." But I have a really difficult time taking whatever they've taught and applying it to my own writing, like consciously applying it.
And is
I
that
don't
out
know.
of a rebellion? Is it rebellion? Like, you told
No,
me, so I don't want to do it, or you just don't know how?
no, not at all. I just don't know how. It's just like, that's a great
Hmm.
idea. I should do that. And then when I go and like actually try to write the book, it just disappears from my mind. But what I've realized is that it's not that I never absorb what's happening, and it's not that I never absorb or I never apply what's happening or what I've learned or what I've read. It's that for me it's a much more subconscious process. And so I'm not consciously saying like, "Oh, this book did it this way, so I should do something similar." It's more, if I read a lot of books that have done it this way, then I'll naturally start doing it that way as well. So that's just like a weird thing for me. So when
No.
a lot of authors are like, "I can't read for fun anymore." I'm like, "I only read for fun."
Yeah, it's funny, the other day I was just like, I've had a pretty hectic week in my brain, and I
Mhm.
was like, I would really like to like slice my head open,
Oh
take
no.
my brain out, put it on a shelf, close it back up, and just sit for like, I don't know, half hour, half a day, I don't know. And just think about nothing. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like I would
mhm,
just like to think about nothing. And then I would like to read, but just read, just take it in, not think about it and like
mhm,
analyze it and make it like a giant life story. But my brain just doesn't work like that. I
mhm,
mean, you talk about your brain doesn't, I will, someone will teach me how to do something and suddenly that will become law and that'll become
mm.
like my life practice. And
Yeah, I can't
it's
do
great
that.
because oftentimes it changes my writing for the better. I remember Helen Humphreys gave me the advice to always write to the end and with every draft because in the initial stages of writing and the initial stages with Stone Thrower and Gutter Child, I was like what I would call seesawing. So chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 1, chapter 2, you know what I mean? And I would
Yeah.
just seesaw and I would never get even past the middle. Sometimes I could get past to the middle maybe.
Mhm,
But I was never getting to the ending until it was like, okay, we need your manuscript. Like give it to us all. And then I'm typing the ending like real quick.
mhm,
And so now I always, every draft I write to the end, and each draft is quite terrible. Draft 1 through like 6 to 10 are terrible, like indecipherable messes. But each draft is generally better than the one before it.
mhm,
And by the time I get to the final draft, I'm finding that the story is more complete, more full, more clearly laid out. And that's because of the like technique that she's given me, which I now teach like it's some kind of like the theory of relativity. Like this is how you write a book when I do workshops. I'm like, this is truth. This is fact. It's the only way to write a book because it's the only way I can write now and
mm,
it's improved my writing so much that I just believe in it like law. So yeah, reading for me is never it's never really relaxing unless it's an audiobook
mm,
and it's a particular kind of genre. So like thriller, crime, romance, I can really like listen to it like I listen to good music, just chill, dance to it, like the equivalent of dancing in the literary world, which is just like smile and like walk around and take it in. But anything else, and I'm really quite analytical about it in a way
mm,
that's not particularly relaxing. Like literary fiction is one of the hardest things for me to read now
mm,
because so much of it is we use the word puzzle, so much of it is like a puzzle where you're trying to put it together and my brain is like actively trying to put the puzzle together, not just on a plot level, but a structural level. Why are they starting with the end of the book? Why are they interrupting the book with like an essay? Why are there footnotes? Like, what are we doing here? And my brain is not relaxing. It's just constantly like working. And I used to really like reading that way and reading books that did that. I really liked analyzing it. And now my brain is just not taking it in and processing it in the same way.
You know what I think it is? I think when I try to apply something that I've learned or that somebody has taught me, I think I get too caught up in making sure I'm doing it right. Am I applying this correctly? Am I doing it the way that they said I should be doing it? And that's something that Cece was talking about last episode too, where if you get too caught up in like, this is the structure that it should be, then you lose sight of the story and you lose sight of your own voice and what it is that you're trying to write. So I think that's what I get caught up in. It's like, if I use this plotting technique, am I doing the plotting right? As opposed to what's the story I'm trying to plot? So that's why I'm like, I just got to throw all that out and just focus on the story and make sure I get the story out there. And then maybe afterward, I can, figure out the rest of it. I don't know.
I see that.
Very
I was
chaotic process.
No, I was thinking about at Fold. Too much information for those of you, but I'll tell it anyways. At Fold, we have this I don't think it's complex. It's a very helpful filing system, but it is quite like complicated. And when we
Guys,
started,
guys,
Lynn was like, guys, I don't want to put a file in the wrong place. I don't want to do the wrong thing. And she was just like so worried about it. I was like, don't worry about it.
this
And now,
No, 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 no.
but
You say it's not complex. It is. It is
okay, it is
very,
kind of
very
complex.
complex. And
But
like
once
I
you know it, it's easy. It's easy to navigate once you know it.
uh,
Okay, just
I
say
don't
that so that I
know.
don't sound like a bad boss or a lunatic. But here is what I'll say. There recently, I opened a folder that only Lynn uses, and it was so meticulously organized and clear that I felt deep pride, but also so impressed and so grateful. And so to me, this is what you're talking about. Like, you don't like systems that are going to get in the way of you just functioning and doing it. But once you understand the intent of it, I think you just incorporate that into the way you operate and you're able to like navigate in that space really easily.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's more like I need to like understand something in order to be able to apply it. And so
Yeah.
when someone is just like, I'm going to go back to the plotting thing, and they're just saying like, oh, you use like these kinds of post-it notes and then you
Yeah.
structure it this way.
Oh,
For me, I'm just like, but how does that actually help me plot better? And if I can't figure out that answer, then I'm just randomly sticking post-its on the wall. And I'm like, that's not
yeah.
actually getting me closer to the end result, which is a good book, right? And so,
Yeah.
um, so yeah.
I've never
Anyway,
been good
that's
at
my brain.
the post-it system. People who have complex post-it systems, it's never been my jam.
No.
Um, but I did start using Scrivener as like a writing tool, and that
Mm.
changed my life for the better. Being
Yeah,
able
I
to move
use
things
Scrivener
around
too.
is way
Scrivener has
easier.
like a bajillion different functions that
Yeah.
I don't know
I'm
how
not
to
using all of
use.
them. I don't, and
Yeah.
I think it's for the same reasons you talk about. Some of them I watch the videos and I'm like, that's too much work. We're doing too much. I'm just gonna keep it in my lane. But there are ones that have been really helpful, and ones that I've used kind of like halfway, and that's enough.
Mhm.
So there's that.
Yeah. So Scrivener,
Hey,
it's a great tool.
Scrivener. All right. Should we do our tips?
Yeah. We're going to
Right.
do top tips for mood reading. Go ahead.
Mm. Okay, so I have two off the top. I'm cheating. Um, One is don't force yourself to stay with books that you are not enjoying.
Mhm.
Um, Give
Life is
yourself
not long enough.
permission. Life is not long enough to read a bad book. If the book is bad, do not pressure yourself, especially if you're someone who you consider to be either a slow reader or someone who you don't feel like you're reading enough books. I think get over that too. But I think just allow yourself to say, this book isn't working for me or it's not working for me right now. And the other thing is explore different formats. So I think a lot of times mood writing can get really impacted by world events and personal events. Let's say you move and your books used to be in a certain place and now you just don't know even where your TBR pile is or where you are in it. Or you used to have a long commute where you would listen to books and now you don't have a commute. Is explore different formats that allow you to navigate reading in different ways. So when Eden was in basketball and I was constantly in gyms just waiting for practice to end, audiobooks and books that were on my phone were critical to like getting through because I never had the same book on me physically. And having it on my phone and having it available as an audiobook allowed me to listen while I was watching his practices. And so having those different formats allowed me to move back and forth and read more books than I would have if I was just relying on my paper books.
Mhm. My tip is for writers is to understand how your reading affects your writing. So as I was saying before, sometimes I need to read in the genre that I'm writing in so that I can get into like that the right space and hit the right tones for that genre. But sometimes I can't read in the genre that I'm writing in because it'll influence my own writing too much. So depending on how you read and how you write, I think it's important to understand how like the stuff that you're consuming affects your output so that you know depending on what you need your output to be to then what should your inputs be.
Awesome. I always like to tease. We've given you top tips. That's how we wrap up each segment. We also like to tease what's coming up. So, coming up in the next episode, we're going to be talking about book conventions and literary festivals. If you've missed it in the past little while, this is a book and lit fest podcast. We spend a lot of time talking about books and writing, but we are going to talk about book events. What's the difference between a book convention and a literary festival? What should you do as a writer at a literary festival? How should you enjoy it as a reader? There's all kinds of things to get into when you talk about Lit Fest, which we're very passionate about, obviously. And so join us next time.
Our next World Academy is on Saturday, October 18th at 12 p.m. Eastern, and romance author Ruby Barrett will be teaching us about how to write intimacy, all those steamy,
Ooh.
sexy scenes. She's very good at it, and if you want to get better, then make sure you come to the Fold Academy. You can register now at thefoldcanada.org/academy.
And those are virtual and available afterwards as well. So be sure to follow us on YouTube so you can get notifications about when the video is up, so you can watch it over and over and over again as you're working on your manuscripts. I also want to give a shout out to Fold Kids Book Fest, which is coming up. A lot of Fold Kids Book Fest runs November 4th through the 9th of 2025. And while we do have in-person events in Brampton that you would need to be in Brampton for, we do have a large range of virtual events specifically for educators, specifically for classrooms and students. So if you're hearing this podcast and you want information, conversations like this for classes of all ages, be sure to check out Fold Kids Book Fest at thefoldcanada.org/kids.
And if you have missed any of our previous episodes, you can find them on our podcast feed on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you listen to podcasts, as well as our Fold YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe so that you know when new episodes come out. If you would like to support the work of the Fold or this podcast, you can leave a review or a rating on your podcast player of choice. And make sure you tell all of your friends about us.
All of your friends.
All of your friends. You can also donate to The Fold at thefoldcanada.org/donate.
Until next time, lots of happy reading to you, and of course, happy writing.